Welcome back to another episode of the IgniteU NY Podcast, powered by NYSTEC, where we connect you to the resources shaping workforce and economic development and small businesses across New York State. In this episode, we're sitting down with Dr. Robert Geer, Vice President of Education and Workforce Development at New York Creates, a leading nonprofit driving innovation, education, and job growth in advanced technologies like semiconductors and nanotechnology. Dr. Geer is a long-standing leader at the intersection of science, education, and economic development. Today, he's helping lead the charge in building a diverse and future-ready workforce that meets the growing demands of New York's rapidly evolving tech ecosystem. Whether you're a student, an educator, a business owner, or just curious about how workforce innovation is happening on the ground, this conversation is for you. Dr. Geer, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Can you go ahead and give us a little intro about yourself?
Oh, absolutely. So I decided to get a PhD in physics because it seemed interesting. I actually went to work for the Navy in Washington, D.C. doing research. And I realized that research was something I really enjoyed doing, wanted to do it at a university level. So I made the trip up to Albany, New York, where I was a faculty in SUNY at the University of Albany, and really worked with a lot of the microelectronic nanotechnology programs that they had, really building up research that was focused on applications as opposed to very fundamental science. And did that for about 20 years. And as a lot of those initial, I would say, development activities took root, resulting in companies like IBM and Global Foundries coming in, you know, the research was great, exciting, a lot of PhD students put out into the workforce. But the employers started coming to us and saying, you know, we need more talent, we need more people. And I realized it was a challenge. And as those types of activities expanded, there was more call to do that. And it's really does take a lot of what we do on the education side, working with industry, a lot of applied and practical learning. And so we started building programs, and those programs grew. And before I knew it, that was essentially the majority of my day, every day. And so I was excited about that. So we did that, a lot of that work informally. And then as New York Creates, as you mentioned, became, you know, it's higher profile, really focused on economic development and research and technology. Part of that mission was to help the regional workforce. And so didn't take too much convincing for me to step in as the Vice President for Education and Workforce Development there, because it's an unparalleled resource. And it was very easy to see exactly where it could make a big difference. It doesn't replace, you know, education, high schools, you know, all the programs that we have. But what it does is it makes them better. And industry was all in. And so it's been a very interesting several years, you know, ramping up these programs. So that's how it happened.
I love that because you kind of answered my next question, which was understanding how New York Creates fits into the broader scheme of all of that. So can you go into a little bit more detail about how New York Creates is really fitting in and enhancing those programs like high school and education?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What, you know, in the microelectronics area, absolutely, you know, nanotech focus, semiconductors, the chips we all use. And, you know, try to get anyone to spend a day without their phone, and you'll know exactly you know, how important it is. So that's the type of R&D we do there. You know, we have very significant corporate partnerships with IBM, Tokyo Electron, Applied Materials. Many of those names are household, some of them aren't, but they're all incredibly important to the industry. We have a leading edge silicon fabrication clean room, and I can safely say it's the only one of its kind in the country, you know, at a nonprofit, period. So that type of experience is what takes someone that comes out with the learning, with the educational, you know, preparation, but they're not ready to go into the industry. You know, they're not ready to walk in and be productive from day one. And so we have the ability to use that infrastructure and the staff that we have to enable that. And that's the sort of capstone. And so you could take someone that's done a great 2-year degree, 4-year degree, graduate, whatever, and bring them in for, a few weeks, a couple months, sometimes a little bit longer. And they have really developed and honed those skills to where they're in demand. And so, that's how we see it. We take that infrastructure, which is built up by R&D, by working with these companies, and turn it into a way to prep people to walk into the industry. And so, it's been very successful so far.
That's amazing. Yeah. And you're prepping people at all different levels to enter the industry. It's not just like a 4-year degree, you're like 2-year degree.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. What people don't rarely understand, at least people in our neck of the woods that are familiar with, the fab that Global Foundries has up in Malta. And if you're in central New York, you're looking forward to something even larger with Micron technology, building a new mega fab there. So when you walk into that, you think, oh boy, big white building, clean rooms, cutting edge stuff. Wow, you must have to go to school for years to do that. Half those people come in that are working at that site have a 2-year degree. Many come right out of high school. Now, there's no shortage of PhDs and master's students, but they're in the minority. So that's what most people don't get about the industry. It's cutting edge, clean, 21st century manufacturing, but it still relies on a lot of those skills that you get at a high school CTE program or a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree. So, that's really the bread and butter of the manufacturers. Now, for those folks looking for R&D professionals, because they want to find a way for AI to work faster than it does, they're going to look for those PhDs, and they get that experience, in our facilities too. So yeah, across the board.
Yeah. But, even if, you eventually wanted to break into doing the R&D style work right out of high school, who could say no to breaking into the industry in such a wonderful way?
Oh yeah, it's great. And, employers, I would say these days, but I think they always have, but employers really look for, people that can come in, talent that is going to develop. They're not looking for people that are at a static level. And so I have lost track of the number of students coming with a 2-year degree that go back to get a 4-year degree, or students that come in with a 4-year degree and say, oh, I'm going back to get my master's. And it's not because it seemed like a fun thing to do, although hopefully it's fun. It's because they see that as enabling other steps in their career.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's really hard to understand how you do that until you really understand what the career looks like. Yeah. And that's another reason we bring people into, our facility, working with our staff, because we have veterans from the industry that have worked there for years, and we have partners, and they're able to, give that firsthand experience to especially young people that come in and say, oh yeah, this is my path. And when you have that knowledge, then you can sort of chart your own path, which is hard to do when you're looking at it from the outside and you have no idea what's going on.
That's so true. And this is such a new industry too, in many ways. New as in like it's really being pushed to a wider plethora of individuals and groups. And we're trying to get more people interested, especially at younger and younger ages. It's like, where do I start to get my foot in the door in this? How would I even know how to do that if I don't have any introduction to it? Which your program is giving this wonderful introduction. We actually took some of our students on a tour of your facilities, and it was so lovely. It was beautiful, like how everything was set up and designed. It's great to get kids excited like that.
Yeah, it's really important for anyone to have, a point of reference so that it's not abstract, and that they see people actually going in and working. They see the career. And to be honest, too often, folks in the tech sector, they don't necessarily connect with, young students, especially middle school and so forth. But, the students coming out are so familiar with using technology. And so when you can connect them to, hey, this is how we develop technology, then they start to understand a bit more and they start to get more curious about the careers. So absolutely, we bring into that facility several thousand, mostly, school age students every year. And it's not that it's, that wasn't sort of part of the mission, but everyone realizes that if you don't get that exposure early and repeat it, then people aren't going to be familiar with the career. And so, yeah, it's a huge priority for us.
Yeah. So starting at the younger age, then, how are you guys kind of not just obviously creating that excitement by bringing the students in, introducing them to it and everything, but how are you sustaining that excitement?
So that's a great question, because when they talk about the talent pipeline, they're really talking about, okay, how do we get people into my field, into my sector of the economy, and it's not easy. One, because in our part of the world, we have math and those things, and they're not the most popular, but they're also it's also just a wide range of skills that are needed. So it is like a funnel where you bring as many people in for short exposures, as they're going through schools, as they're thinking about what they're, as they're developing their own sort of identity for themselves and plan for what they like. And then as they sort of move into those next steps, then you work with those next steps. So examples are, students that may do, I'm not going to do the college prep thing. These, CTE, which are, career and technical programs, because I'd like to go into the workforce. I like some of these, careers a bit better. I'm going to do that. Those are exactly the type of careers that work well on the manufacturing floor, supporting and troubleshooting and repairing equipment that costs 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million. So you need to get those students as they decide, okay, I'm not into that 4-year thing. I'm going to maybe do this and then maybe a 2-year degree. It's like, okay, this is where this industry needs you. Same thing for folks that are saying, oh, I'm definitely going to go into that science, engineer, biomedical, life science. And then afterwards, I don't know. Okay, you bring them in and you say, okay, this is where an engineer would work. This is where, someone with your background is going to work, and engage them. And it goes right up the pathway from there. So folks that are definitely set on doing graduate work, I'd like to get a master's degree. Okay, come in and do an internship with us. We'll tell you what this field is, and we'll give you a little bit of direction of, if you want to go into it, what you need. And then all the way up to, students working on their PhDs, that we would like to come into this industry. We give them a chance to look at what it is, what the research is, what difference you're making. So it's really stepping into each part of that pipeline and, for lack of a better word, selling, moving into this career, making sure people understand what it is. So, it's not something we can do for every student, for everyone's looking to change a career, what have you, but we put as many people through as we possibly can.
Yeah, well, you're not going to get them all, right? Everybody has different interests in life, ultimately. But it's great to hear that you have such wonderful turnouts and you're getting thousands of students in there and they're seeing the whole space and meeting people as well. So Dr. Geer, can you then speak on the importance of aligning education with the current industry?
Sure. It's critical. You can't create education programs that are so narrowly focused that it may be great for one industry, but sort of locks a person into a path. And also, not every industry hires or expands every year. Everything goes up and down. And certainly folks that have, lived in our region, pick an industry, they've seen it go up and go down in terms of how many people they need. Sometimes industries change. They don't need the same skills they needed 10 years ago. So too many folks think, okay, let's just make this really narrow training program, this narrow degree program, which is fine if you're that employer, but doesn't work overall. So when we talk about building a mature sort of education ecosystem for this, what we want to do is take those skills that are in common with this industry, say microelectronics, semiconductors, and stress those skills that are transferable, that students can use anything and anywhere. So a great example these days is, especially in this area, is biotech. You have a pharmaceutical company like Regeneron, and I guarantee you there's a large overlap between the skills they need and the skills that a fab needs. The same thing for people working in the emerging energy sectors. A lot of the same technology needed. And I'll say it too, because the semiconductor industry or chip industry uses a lot of automation. the same skills that are required there are the same skills that are required in an Amazon warehouse, which is highly automated and they need people to keep it running. So what we do as much as we can is to work with, our educational partners and make sure they're getting those key skills. Maybe not everyone, maybe not every skill that's needed, but we take the 70% that's in common with other industries, and then we put out students who are going to be successful. So that is what keeps students coming back to those programs. Whether it's word of mouth, whether it's, whatever that education institution, 2-year college, 4-year college, advertises, the most important thing is that their students are successful. Otherwise, no one's going to walk into your program. So we do that a lot. And the nice thing about that, and yes, it's a little self-serving, is we say, sure, you've got this great base, this great foundation, you can work anywhere. Come and spend a summer with us and you'll get all those extra skills that'll make you extremely employable in this sector. So we know where we're starting from. And being able to do that at a range of institutions across a region, that separates a region that's ready for this type of expansion versus a region that's going to struggle. And so, that's where Eastern New York has played that game, has played that or worked through that playbook for the last, decade at least, supporting Global Foundries, IBM, the other companies in the region. And now with, more investment going into Central New York, they're going to find themselves looking at the same playbook, and they have the benefit of other people going through it, in the state. And, it will help everyone across the state because more people coming in, more programs. So, it's trying to build a balance to where you can support the industry when it needs it, but you're not limiting, your graduates by putting them into a path that's too narrow.
No, that's really brilliant. I think that having transferable skills is so essential for anyone entering the workforce within any industry. So it's really great to hear that your programs are designed so that people can kind of feel around and see what actually works for them and what their true passion is. Because you're a great example of what being passionate about what you do turns out as a result. I mean, look at all that you've accomplished so far. So if you can find the opportunity to give kids areas to play around in, especially in the tech field, they can find what truly is passionate for them, and they can really be a part of a huge impact that we're kind of going through with semiconductors and manufacturing in New York State.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You can't convince someone to do something they really don't want to do.
Yeah.
So you more focus on, finding ways to let people understand what about it is that they like. And so, that's a lot of what we do. And trying to convince people that, math and science is not bad.
It's not. Yeah, so. It's not that bad, and it can be fun. Dr. Geer, what kind of partnerships have you seen to be the most effective in academia and industry right now?
It depends a lot on, where they're sort of connecting with education. I've stressed, throughout our discussion that, building that awareness of what the career path looks like is critical. So, and it looks different at different stages. So industry is at their best when they're able to bring, learners, any stage of life, any background, in to connect with the careers they have. Because once people find out and appreciate the fact that they have skills that will make a difference or in demand, it's a whole different ballgame. They are really engaged with the employer. So, for example, for high school students, bringing high school students in and showing them that, okay, we have an apprenticeship program, and you coming out of this program, this background is perfect for our apprenticeship program. Once they get in, and they may not, especially if they're from the region, they maintain contacts with their friends, family, and all of a sudden other people see this path is there. So that's a great role for industry when they're able to sort of, spread the gospel like that. Now, when we get to other types of, other areas, then we look for a bit more. We want to see industry, actually funding projects for research and development at education, academia, because it provides a way to support students to develop those skills in direct connection with the company. And, that's a challenge because everyone has a bottom line. But that, to be honest, for the nation's R&D workforce, and a lot of them are in semiconductor manufacturing and development. Now, that's a tried and true method. And so funding research at institutions that it's very applied, very industry focused, it is an important way to get this sort of talent in. And then the other areas, depending on what sort of demographics or sectors you're looking at for talent, it may look differently. And a great example is our veterans program, where we'll bring people in either active duty, in some case veterans have been out for years, and we'll give them some hands-on training, 80 hours, and then they'll move on to an industry internship or a fellowship, which is maybe just for 8 weeks. But that's the company's ability to host that has been, really has been game changing, because to be honest, someone coming out of military service has so many skills that are in demand. Once they get that sort of hands-on exposure there, all of a sudden they see, oh, I can do this, I can do it well. And so, that's asking industry to sort of step up, take their time away from, whatever business they're doing. But it pays huge dividends. And so, yes, we're asking for time from industry. We're asking for money, and also guidance. And even though I have, our colleagues in industry that I work with, literally on a weekly basis, we'll ask yet again, hey, can you give us some advice on this? It's like, we love this and we love that you're all doing it, but I've received 17 of these emails in the last 2 days. Yes, I know, but it's that engagement which keeps people coming back. So, it really is making sure there's a constant conversation, collaborating on programs. And yes, we do ask them to pony up, but they're the ones that are reaping the benefits when they find good talent.
Right. Industry investing in its workforce is essential, and that's always been something that has existed and still currently exists. So it's great to hear that New York Creates is part of that as well, and creating those connections for industry to be able to invest in its workforce. How do apprenticeships and internships play into your overall workforce strategy?
For us at New York Creates, it's a huge component, in several different ways. Those two things, apprenticeships and paid internships, and there's a lot of demand for talent these days, so practically all internships are paid. It's a learn and earn model. What sets apprenticeships apart in our industry is that they're usually coupled with, the apprentice taking courses, oftentimes at a local 2-year or 4-year college. Industry loves that, right? Because they're seeing someone that's invested, that is building their skills. So the benefit of both of these approaches is that, one, you're earning money. And, too often students need to, work a side job or 2 side jobs. This takes a little bit of that pressure off. And of course, apprentices are full-time employees primarily, so they're good to go. So these are incredibly important because they're both on-the-job training situations. Internships are shorter. Now, apprenticeships, if your audience is of my vintage, they might think, oh yeah, like an apprentice, electrician or pipe fitter or plumber, and yeah, it's like a 4-year sort of thing. Yeah, there are absolutely those modes that exist, but in the semiconductor industry, it tends to be much shorter. So we're talking, 14, 15 months, something like that. And that's done because it brings them in, gives them some hands-on skills, allows them to increase their skills through, whatever related technical instruction they're doing, a class here, training there, and that puts them on that path. So these are, if you think of education and training and workforce development as kind of a pyramid, both of those in that learn and earn model, internship, apprenticeships, are at the tip of that pyramid, because they're interacting with an employer. Or if they're not interacting with the exact employer you're going to end up with, they're interacting with an employer in the field, in the sector. And so that provides that key learning that you just can't get anywhere else. So, and I like to say that, we really paved the way for this, but no, it's been a standard tool in everyone's toolkit for really how they build their talent pipelines.
Yeah, there is a very big trend, and it's been around for a while, but getting students out of the classroom and actually into the industry and doing the work, and it's great to hear that your apprenticeships and internships are exactly that. That's
Absolutely. We have an apprenticeship program of our own. It's great. It's a great way to develop, the talent that Works at New York creates. And we support apprenticeship programs, for a number of our industry partners, either by engagement, sometimes training, certainly, supporting classwork, and I would say, when I say with our education partners, I'm serious. So we help develop content that's used currently at a place like Hudson Valley Community College in our neck of the woods. Same content's being used at Onondaga Community College, which is out in Syracuse, which is getting ready for a big semiconductor fab. So, that's and that type of development is exactly what's looked at for apprentices coming in or interns coming in. So, yeah, I don't want to say it takes a village because that's a little, overused, but it does take that broad ecosystem to support these.
I think saying it takes a village makes complete sense. It does. There's many pieces to this puzzle, especially in the semiconductor manufacturing world. So earlier we touched a little bit on your veterans program. What kind of programs do you have for rural communities or women in STEM?
Yeah, we partner especially with our partnership with SUNY. I mean, we're next to a SUNY campus. We have a SUNY department inside our facility. So we absolutely do partnering for bringing, in many cases, young women into these fields. And so I could go list a couple of programs, 15 Love, a few others that really work with, young women from a range of communities across New York and bring them in to give them exposure to our facility. Rural communities, for us, we absolutely work with, our education partners in our region to bring talent that really doesn't have access to a place like ours here. It's a little bit limited by logistics, but we've had a great program with the folks in Fulton and Montgomery County, especially through, Fulton Montgomery Community College, and able to bring folks, into this area. So it works out really, really well, I have to say, because, and I'm going to touch into some stereotypes here, but what doesn't happen as much in the last 20 years as it did the 20 years before was there's not as much exposure with young people to mechanical systems, to electrical systems, for a host of reasons. You don't work on your own car anymore. One, because it's driven by computer chips and, there's only so much you can do. And don't even get me going about EVs. That's really complex.
Yes.
So there's a lot of, hands-on skills that aren't as common as they once were. When we move into rural communities, that's not really, it hasn't changed as much. And so there's a lot of call for people that have those hands-on skills, because I can sit at a keyboard and do some great things, but if a $75 million piece of equipment is down, odds are I probably won't be able to fix that with a keyboard. There will be components in there that have to be identified, faults that have to be fixed. And when the company's revenue depends on that piece of equipment being up, then you go to the people that have the skills to do that. So there are definitely communities that have those skills more prominently than others. So absolutely, rural communities, easier to find that skill base there. That's no question. Far and away, that is exactly why veterans are in demand. One, they're used to working in organized, sort of hierarchical, workflows. So they understand that if I'm going to do this job, someone else has to do their job. And when we both do that, we're going to be successful. And so likewise, they also come with a tremendous amount of just hands-on capability that counts for so much in the industry. So there's a little bit of commonality there. For women, if you look overall, especially in the US, there's a tremendous parity in science and technology between men and women, except when you get to the chip industry. I won't say it's the only one, but it's significant. And if I go into the life sciences, pharmaceutical, bio, yeah, it's actually very, very even across the board. There's a lot of exposure to that, or I should say, understanding of that career path. So we work really hard to bring women, especially young women in schools, and be able to give them exposure to this, because the same type, when you're working in an environment that requires a lot of communication, a lot of team-based problem solving, then you're really better off when you have a broad group of people with different backgrounds, different ways of communicating, different sensibilities. Because too often, when everyone has the same approach to something, the first time, as soon as that approach doesn't work, you're in trouble, right? And so, we try to bring those, especially rural, absolutely, but especially young women in this field, because it hasn't had the traction over the last several decades. And so, we're hoping to change that.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any specific things that you're kind of doing right now to attract women?
Trying to convince them that coming to upstate New York for 2 months in the summer and working in a clean room, or working with engineers or doing design work, it is fun. So it takes a little bit of time, but we've got, we just onboarded, the folks that work on my team onboarded about 30 interns a couple weeks back. They'll be here through the end of July. And so it's quite a lift.
Yeah.
They're living on campus right next door. They walk across to work. Great. And a lot of them are young women. And, our goal is the same. There's a fantastic pathway here for you to make a contribution, to really impact, life in society. And doing it through tech is not a bad thing to do. So, yeah, we'll see. When we do our follow-on surveys in a year, we'll let you know how that turned out.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to it. I'm curious, too, do you do any work with any of the BOCES programs as well? Talking about rural communities?
BOCES programs are great because they do focus a lot on those skills I touched on. Yeah. And I'd be lying if I'd said, industry wants, these PhDs, master students, but they want electricians more, because you need people to keep the lights on. And I'm not kidding about that. So BOCES programs are fantastic. People coming out of that, even HVAC. Yes, when you come out of a BOCES program doing, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, that you would think, okay, fine, I can install that in homes or commercial buildings. But that's the base sort of skills to be able to build a, $1 billion clean room. You need that.
Right.
And so those are very important. In fact, my hope is we can do this in the fall of this year. We'll be hosting a BOCES class in our facility several days a week, mostly to give them exposure to to work-based learning.
Right.
And that's very valuable. And it's not a big heavy lift for us, because they'll just be teaching the courses in our facility, but it makes it really easy to connect with the professionals at our site. So yeah, I love the way New York has structured BOCES across the state. I think it's a great way to do it. I tell other people in other states, hey, this works really well for us, because we get access to, I don't know how many districts are in a BOCES, 10, 15, 20. Right. We get access to all of those districts' talent through the programs that BOCES offers.
That's great. Yeah, BOCES is a wonderful program. Are you able to share with us a success story that illustrates the impact of New York Creates?
Of course. If I didn't, I think I'd be fired. But absolutely. And listen, the most gratifying success stories are the ones, where there's a happy ending, right? Where you see that transition from whatever program to employment. Now you can be just as successful helping someone, 5 years earlier in the pipeline, but the gratification's a bit delayed, and we always don't get to see it. So the success stories that we really point to are often the people that come through our facility that end up going to employers. We had one of our veterans programs. It wasn't an active duty military. It was a gentleman that had been out of the military for several years, and I think he was working at a local Home Depot, a fine place to be, and but it wasn't the career path he was interested in. But he didn't have a great idea of where he could really, where he could find a path that he was interested in. So we brought him into our program, 2 weeks, and very concentrated training. 80 hours, you're there, dawn till dusk, you're not sitting in a chair. You're up at a bench, you're taking systems apart, you're putting them back together. You have people telling you, this is the skills that you need. And he took that on his resume. And just a few months after he finished our program, not even that, I think, worked with a company. It's actually a Japanese company that builds equipment and supports fabs. And they have a location here in New York. The company's called Screen. And started. And it was like a tremendous, usually it doesn't happen that fast to where he's finishing our program. I think it was in, I don't know, October. And after the new year, he was working. So there are great examples like that, as well as a lot of our, interns and so forth that sometimes we offer them jobs, but a lot of time industry says, oh, perfect experience, come on board. So there are a lot of those stories like that. It's most gratifying when it's someone that didn't realize that they have the skills to really succeed in this industry, and but they find out they're perfect for it. And I forgot. I think I don't know. I've lost track of 100 or so people that have passed through that veterans program in the last 4 or 5 years that are just that walked right into a job. So that's great. And we have examples too from our students we work with that are working in our partners, labs or in their teams and so forth. So, a lot of good success stories there. But to be honest, if we have a young person coming in that decides to, say, pursue a degree or a program in the sciences, I count that as a victory too.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you got them in the door. That's a victory for sure. So, talking about all of this, coming into a nice bow of everything, we want to understand what is the future of this workforce? What are we looking to kind of fill? Why are we putting so much information out there to such a wide range of people to get them interested in this industry?
Certainly. I'll speak to the microelectronics, the semiconductor more specifically. It's a great industry to have because, just to be blunt, it pays well. The careers are solid. The demand is always increasing. I think since the 1980s, a long time ago, with the exception of maybe 1 year, the amount of silicon in the world produced each year exceeds that from the year before. And by silicon, I mean chips. It's hard to point to too many other industries which can claim that. So you're not just picking up, a well-paying career. You're picking up a career that has, or a field, I should say, an industry that has grown continually. And there's bumps in the road all over the place. Sometimes industries expand 1 year, don't expand the next, but the demand is keeps increasing. So when we look in, New York State, that's one of the reasons we'd like to have it, right? Because you want industries that are growing. You want industries that have a lot of, promise. And the chip industry is one of them. So, but that places a lot of stress because you have to be able to supply that industry with talent. If I build a chip fab, before I can open the doors, I'm going to invest billions in hardware. Now, that's fine. That's a challenge, right? Someone has to be willing to make the investment. And so usually companies are looking, okay, can we afford to do this? But equally as important to them is, can I get the people? Because having a building with $5 billion of equipment in it is absolutely useless if you have no one that can run it. So they're very concerned. Now, New York State is in a great position there because, we have quite a few people. We have a lot of 2-year colleges, a lot of 4-year colleges, a lot of great universities. So we have, we put a lot of talent through, and we just have to keep them here. So with the CHIPS Act and other investments by industry, I think we're expecting probably somewhere close to 12,000 direct jobs, over the next, say, 5 to 10 years, which, for a state like New York, significant population, that doesn't seem a lot, but it really is, because you're taking 12,000 people that are just working in the manufacturing, mind you, and convincing them to make that choice versus any other choice. Moreover, if you have 12,000 people working in those, in those chip fabs, you have at least that many working at the companies that support the chip fabs. And then you have folks that work at the companies that support the companies that support the chip fab. And so all of a sudden, 12,000 becomes 25,000, becomes 40,000. And then it gets, then you have to say, okay, I have to support this entire industry. And a great example is a company like Corning. I think Corning, makes glass. Okay, true. But that glass and the materials they make are critical, for chip fabs. So if there are expansions of chip fabs in New York, that means Corning's going to, move more product that they make into the state, and they'll hire more people. And the same thing is true across the board. So, from an economic perspective, it's an ecosystem. And so, having an anchor employer that's actually a manufacturer, that means that they're going to be surrounded by other companies to support them, more jobs, and more people spending that money in the state of New York, right? So, okay, it does increase real estate prices. It can be good or bad depending which end you're on. But the fact is that more money goes in the communities. And if you want an example, locally, just look at Saratoga County, before Global Founders and afterwards. The same thing in Hillsboro, Oregon, where Intel is based. The same thing in Chandler, Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, Austin, Texas. Places go from, quiet towns to really, bustling, economic, healthy areas when they have industries like this.
Yeah, and the outstretch of that, like what you said, the 12,000 will lead to 25, will lead to 40. That doesn't just impact the small cities across New York State, that impacts the small towns as well. So we're going to see a lot of rippling effects from all of this.
I think so. Especially in this day and age where, there's a lot of folks that are, at a facility every day working. Absolutely, that's critical. But it also builds a remote workforce. So that means maybe not as much pressure to commute every day. It absolutely will have an impact.
Yeah. Dr. Geer, thank you so much for being here with us today. That wraps up our conversation with Dr. Geer from New York Creates. As we've heard, preparing the workforce of tomorrow means rethinking how we collaborate across education, industry, and government to create real opportunities for all New Yorkers. If you want to learn more about New York Creates and the workforce programs we've talked about today, be sure to check out the links in our episode description. And if you're enjoying these conversations, don't forget to give us a like, subscribe, and share our podcast. We've got more stories and insights coming your way, helping you connect with tools, resources, and people driving change across New York State. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.